According to the ancient Greeks, the world was created from chaos. This is not chaos in the traditional sense, lack of order, but as the Greeks explained it, primeval emptiness of the universe. An Encyclopedia of Britannica describes chaos as an abyss. The Greek myths are fascinating tales of monsters, gods, love, and loss. They tell stories much like the ones on TV, but with a bit more magic. In fact, most of the Greek myths are extremely complex, but they're just trying to explain the world at a very basic level that lacks science. I have always been fascinated by Greek mythology, the incredible world that it creates. I have also conducted a lot of research on the myths to better understand my own interest. I will begin by discussing the origin story the ancient Greeks provided. Second, I will tell the tale of the Titans and the subsequent 6 bigger gods. Finally, I will discuss how these myths were celebrated by the ancient Greeks. According to the ancient Greeks, nothing existed except chaos at the beginning of the universe, and this is how they depicted her. From this chaos sprang 3 other beings: Eros, god of love; Gaia, goddess of the earth; and Tartarus, a place worse than hell. After this origin story, more characters are introduced, including gods, goddesses, 3-headed dogs, and many more unbelievable creatures. As far as origin stories go, the Greeks thought of a pretty simple one. From chaos sprang everything else. After this, everything gets a little more complicated. While chaos could be perceived as the mother of everything, Gaia was what really got everything started, and this is how they depicted her. Gaia is supposed to represent the earth, or more specifically, the ever-sure foundation of all the deathless ones who hold the peaks of snow Olympus. As the website GreekMythology.com describes her, Gaia did not have anyone to really mate with, so she created some for herself. From Gaia sprang Uranus, the sky; Aurea, the mountains; and Pontus, the sea. As I mentioned before, Gaia did mate with 2 of these beings, Uranus and eventually Pontus, whose children are a little less important to the story we're going to tell today. From their mating, Gaia and Uranus had 12 children. The 2 most important ones are Rhea and Kronos. According to the myths, Uranus did not let any of these children out of Gaia's womb. He would just throw them back down to Earth, where they were trapped. Of these 12, only one was strong enough to defeat Uranus when the time came, Kronos. The attack upon Uranus began with Gaia. She wanted her children to be free, so she created a plan. Gaia gave Kronos a sickle to attack his father with. When the time came, he did exactly that by chopping off his genitals, which is how someone depicted it in modern times here. Kronos then freed his brothers and sisters and started his reign as the ruler of Earth. Now that I have discussed the basic origins of the Titans, I'm going to explain their fall from power in the Age of the Gods. While Kronos was a better ruler, he did not learn much from his father's mistakes. At first, the reign of Kronos was one of peace. Everyone was happy, including the humans. However, he eventually changed his tune. Some myths say Kronos began to fear rebellion, and that is why he changed so dramatically. One of the main things Kronos changed was imprisoning the Cyclops and 100-handed ones in Tartarus. This was an issue because they were also Gaia's children, and she is a protective mother. Kronos also took a page out of his parents' book and mated with a family member, Rhea. Rhea and Kronos had 6 children together: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus. These 6 children were very powerful and would later form the Olympians. Kronos was still fearing being overthrown, so he decided to make sure none of his children could succeed him by swallowing them whole. Because they were immortal, this didn't hurt them, but they couldn't escape. Neither Rhea or Gaia appreciated the gods being swallowed, so they concocted a plan. When Zeus was born, Rhea fed Kronos a rock. Clearly, this was very convincing because he didn't suspect anything. While Rhea fed Kronos the rock, Zeus was taken to an island and raised and taught to fight. When the time came, he defeated his father by throwing him in Tartarus, after releasing his siblings, of course. They took over Mount Olympus and have ruled ever since, according to the myths. Now that we have covered the basics of Greek mythology, I will discuss the way the gods and goddesses were celebrated by the Greeks. While the myths of the ancient Greeks are extremely interesting, it is important to understand who created them and how they were celebrated. Temples were the big thing for the Greeks. They created them with the belief that the gods could actually visit them and maybe even live inside. The ancient Greeks also prayed and made sacrifices to certain gods during certain times. This was important because it explained their devotion to their gods. I began by discussing the origin story of the Greeks provided for their gods. Second, I discussed their original titans and subsequent 6 bigger gods. Finally, I discussed how the ancient Greeks celebrated their gods. As I discussed, the Greeks' myths are extremely complex, even at the most basic level, but they were used to explain natural phenomena, like the earth. In conclusion, the Greek myths are one of the oldest dramas this world has to tell. The story started out very simple, but ended in changes of power and cannibalism. But it's still important to remember who created them and why.